Hey everyone, we'll get started in a couple minutes.
Excuse me, I think your volume was muted previously.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so we'll get started. The first thing we'll do is if no one had if everyone didn't have a chance to go over the Flexbox Froggy game, we'll just go through that quickly so that people can get more comfortable with Flexbox. So we went through the first 5 levels last class, so we'll just continue this and hopefully you guys can answer all of it, and I won't have to do anything. So does anyone know this one? So here we want to move the frog boat to the center vertically and horizontally.
First you would say center.
Okay, so
Correct, you would say center.
Okay, so I'll do justify content center. And then what else?
Flex center, sir.
Sorry?
Flex center.
Center.
Flex center like this?
Yes.
I actually am not sure if that's a property, so we can check that really quick.
Might not be.
Yeah, so you can do flex start and flex end,
Oh,
but for centering, it's just center. So I'll remove this, and yeah, looks like it worked.
I see.
Cool. How about this? So
Wait,
now we
Rishabh,
want
just to
to,
be clear,
sorry?
So Flexbox will be used to like align stuff like images, right, in our HTML.
Yeah, you can use it for pretty much anything. Any real container that you
Okay.
have, but yeah, it mostly will be used for images and things like that. Just
Got
like
it.
big
So
blocks.
what is the difference between justify content and align items?
Yeah, so justify content will move it along the container, so like basically horizontally. So as you saw, when we had only justify content, it moves it to the right side. And align items will move it within the container like vertically. So align items will make it move down basically, assuming the container is a Flexbox row, direction row. So if direction
I
row,
see.
that means that the container moves, yeah. So Krishav said it right. Justify content is x-axis, align items is y-axis. And this changes though when you're using a direction column for the Flexbox, because then it is basically flipped. Okay, let's see the next one. So now we want to move them to the bottom of the container, but we also want to spread them out. So does anyone know what properties we'll use here?
Align items end.
Yeah, flex
Flexend.
end.
Yeah. Okay.
Good job. And then what would we want to do for justify content?
This is like a spread.
Yeah, we want
I
to spread
believe
them
there
out. Does
was-
anyone know the property for that?
Right or left?
Margin. Center. Adding.
So we can try
around?
center. So
Space
center
around.
will just move them. Yep,
It's
you got it.
space-
Space around. Good job. So yeah, so that'll add space both on the left and the right of the frogs. If we did space between, then there would be no space on the left and the sides basically. So yeah. Cool. Okay, so now it looks like we want to move them to the right side of the screen. So right now,
Is there a
Justify
command to
content.
reflect it?
sorry.
Just row. Isn't
To
it just row
reflect
reverse?
I think it's
Yeah,
justify
so
content center.
No,
if
flex
we look
direction
at,
row reverse.
so we can try justify content center. So I think it's important to read the top. So here it's saying we should use flex direction.
Oh,
So justify content center will move it to the center, but what we really want is for it to be on the very right. And if you notice the order of the frogs, green is on the left and red is on the right. So to do that, we'll obviously want to reverse them. So I think someone said it.
row
I
reverse.
think it'll be, yeah. Cool. So now we can see that the red one moved to the left. So that's what we want. Cool. So now,
Column reverse and
close, but looks like the order is actually fine, this one, right? Because the green one is already in its spot.
It would be column, top to bottom.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we'll need to use both properties here and see if we can reverse them and put them in the right spots. Okay, so I see in the chat that someone said flex direction row reverse. Yep, so now we can see that moves them to the right side as we saw in the previous question. So yeah, someone already said that we'll want to justify content to the left so that it now fits on the pads. Oh, I think, yeah, I'm not sure why this is not working. Justify. Oh, it's called start.
it's actually Flex direction, flex end.
Oh, because so we're yeah, good job. So we're actually reversing it. Wait, flex.
Yeah, that's wrong. Sorry.
No. Yeah,
It's
so
it's
so we're
reverse and then end for justify content, I think.
No, there's
yeah,
a
because
problem with
the,
that level.
it's I think yeah. So the problem is that we're reversing it. So we actually have to do the opposite for justify content. My bad. Yeah. So instead of flex start, since it's going in this direction, we'll actually want it to be the end. Cool. So for these ones, we'll use flex direction and justify content.
Flex direction column.
Cool. And then here's a good explanation. Justify content changes the vertical and align items changes horizontal when flex direction is column. So does anyone know which property we would want to use?
Justify content and then flex end.
Yep. Cool. Cool. So this one, what we want to do is actually spread them apart and also reverse them if we can see. So we'll need flex direction something and justify content. Okay, so flex direction, column reverse, yeah. And then what do we want to do for justify content?
Space
We want to spread them apart. Yep. Cool. So now we want to move them to the bottom of the screen, but also center them and reverse them. So
What did we do for the last one?
yeah, so here we want to do column reverse because if you see how it started, it was the green one was first, right? So by doing column reverse, the red one becomes first. And then the last thing you want to do is say space between so that it'll spread them out to take up the whole screen.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go to Sublime Text after this and start working on some code. So yeah, so here we'll need three different properties. Anyone have any ideas?
Align items center.
Okay, align items center. So
It's justify content center.
Right.
yeah, so if you remember,
Justify content center. Correct.
align items will work vertically when we're looking at a flex direction row, but we are able to change the flex direction here as well. So does anyone know what we want for that?
Row reverse.
Row reverse.
Yep. So now it looks like we have it in the right direction and in the right spot on the page, but we just need it to be at the bottom. So how can we use align items to do that?
Flex start, correct?
Yep, I think it's flex end here because even though it's reverse, we're really going from top to
I
bottom.
see.
So align items cares about top to bottom. So
we don't like
yeah.
actually consider the reverse in this situation.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So now we can learn a new property. It's the order property. And this one allows us to order our items and reorder them using the property. So here we're saying for just the yellow frog, like we can put it in a different order. Okay, so I see -1. So that will move it to the very start because assuming everything is 0, -1 will be the least. So it'll go to the very left. So if we make it 1, then it goes to the very right. So that's what we want.
You could
And-
also do
and I-
3.
Yeah, so you can basically do any number as long as it's bigger than 0, because as we can see here, the default is 0.
Wait, so how exactly do the order commands work?
So it's right here in this paragraph. So basically, each item will have a value of 0 to start with, and then when you add a integer here, it'll order it based on the integer. So since we're saying for the yellow one that we want to order of 1, it'll be the very last one because it's the highest number.
And then it'll be like -1, 0, 1.
No, so these will still have 0 and 0.
Oh,
And
okay.
so to start with, they all have 0, and they're just
Okay.
placed in the order that they're displayed on the page in their HTML.
Yeah.
But when you add an order property, it actually can reorder them regardless of how they're ordered in the HTML.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool. So now we want to move the red frog to the very start. So let's try -1. Yeah, so -1 will move it to the very front, and that's because all of these are 0. So we learned the align items property that moves all of the items of this box to a certain spot on the page. But now we want to move just one item using the align self property. So we can adjust this yellow frog using the align self property. So does anyone know what we want to use for that?
Flex end.
Yep. So that's because this is the flex start, and then this would be the end, the bottom of the page. So remember, align affects the vertical y-axis. Cool. So now we'll use both align self and order to see if we can move these frogs to the spots, to their lily pads. So yep, I think someone already got it. So we have align self flex end. So this will move our yellow frogs to the bottom, which is what we want next to their pads. And then if we order them to, well, okay, so let's try order to -1. So what that does is it actually will move them to the very start, because remember we go from least to greatest. So the lowest numbers will be on the left. So we'll actually need to do order 1 here so that they are on the right, because the bigger the number is, the more far right it goes. Cool. So we have the flex wrap property. This allows us to wrap our items when they get to a certain spot on the page, basically. So as you can see, we kind of squished our frogs here. So does anyone know how we can wrap them?
Now wrap.
What was that?
Now wrap.
It's wrap, just wrap.
Yeah, so we want to use wrap because before it was actually no wrap, and I believe that's the default. So when you have no wrap, it doesn't it just squishes them together on the page. But when we add wrap, it'll actually move them to the bottom and just make them fit properly. Cool. So anyone have any ideas for this?
Flex direction, and then it would be column.
Yeah, so you want to move them in the column direction. But now it looks like they're squished together again.
Flex wrap wrap.
Flex wrap wrap, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now we can learn a shorthand. So flex flow will combine both flex direction and flex wrap into one property. So as we did in the last level, we wanted column and we wanted to wrap. So that's all you have to do, and it'll do both the things we wanted in one line. Cool. So now we'll use align content. And here we can see the distinction. Align content determines the spacing between the lines. So between 1, 2, and 3. And align items determines how the items as a whole are aligned within the container. So does anyone know what we would want to do for content, align content?
Align content flex start.
Yeah, so that tells us that we want the lines are packed at the top of the container, so there's less space between them at the top. Yeah. Cool. We'll want to use align content again here.
Oh, flex end.
Yep. So that's the same thing except the end of the container. Cool. So now we have a few things to do.
Flex
What was that?
direction. Column reverse.
What was
Wait.
that? Flex direction.
Just column.
Column.
Column reverse.
Cool. Yeah. So we wanted to switch the red and the yellow, so we can do reverse, and now they're on the right sides. And then we want to move our content so it's squished together.
Center.
Now wrap. Oh, center.
Yeah. So we want to say center because we want everything to be in the center of the container and not to spread out basically. Cool. Last level. So now they're not telling us what property to use. You can use any of the properties we've learned. And let's see if we can do this. Okay, so I see flex wrap.
Flex direction, column reverse.
Yeah, so let's try that first. Column reverse. Okay.
Align item center. Wait, no, it would be justify content center because you flip the align items.
Yeah, so justify content center. That will not do anything because we're already kind of squished here. So by centering it in the column, it's already centered.
Flex wrap wrap, correct?
Yeah, so I think we'll want to wrap because usually when things are squished together, we will want to do that.
Row reverse.
So if we do row reverse, we're going to go back to this format, but we can see that the lily pads are in a column. So I think what we'll want to do is keep it as columns. And then remember, we can use the order properties too to reorder our. So I see align content flex end. So that looks better. and it looks like the yellow ones are still at the end. So is there anything we can do to fix that?
Can you do order reverse?
No, but we can specify order of certain elements. So we can say order 0, 1, 2, -1, -2. So I see align content flex start. That moves our, yeah, so let's try order -1. Or, oh wait, actually we won't be able to change the order of a specific element because we're looking at the pond itself. So let me see if we can access the yellow. Yeah, I'm not sure how we would look at yellow specifically. Yeah. Does anyone have any other ideas? Okay, so one thing that we didn't learn was wrap reverse. So this will basically say wrap it, but reverse the order when we wrap it. So that way now our yellow ones are on the right side of the page. And then for align content, we'll want to actually do space between. So this will spread out our elements and move.
Not now. I'm in a class. Do we seriously all end up being on here at the exact?
Turn off your mic,
yeah,
kid.
So now we'll have a space between our elements, and then and anyone know what the last thing we'll want to do is to move these yellow elements up.
Isn't it justify content center?
Yep. Yeah. So since we're in a column, what we want to do is actually use justify content instead of align items. So I saw someone say align items, which is the right idea, but we want within this column, we want to justify it to the center of the column. So yeah, that's how we do that. Cool. So hopefully that, don't worry about the last level too much. That was pretty hard, but hopefully the first 23 levels gave you guys a better idea of Flexbox, and that'll really help us when we are writing our CSS for our web page. So let's go back to the personal website really quick, and let's see if people have any other questions about this before we keep going. And maybe the CSS will make a little more sense now that we understand it. So
I have some questions.
yeah.
So number one, we made several different pages, like the JavaScripting, the styles.css, and the HTML. I was wondering how those all are linked.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we have these 3 files, as everyone can see. So there's the HTML file, there's a JS file. So just by looking at the extensions, we can see that the JS means JavaScript, and CSS is for our design and styling. So for CSS, so HTML is our main file, and that's what we want to put in our browser. So as you can see here, this is my index.html file. That's what actually displays our content. And within our HTML file, we can specify our CSS and JavaScript. So here we specify our CSS. Rel equals style sheet is just to say that this is a style sheet. This is CSS that helps us design our page and style our page the way we want it. So that's never going to change. The href, yeah. So the href is, yeah. What's your question?
Sorry. So for the about me activities, I followed the code like you said inside the GitHub link, I think, and
yeah.
For me, it didn't have any spacing.
it didn't have spacing here?
Didn't have spacing like that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so make sure that you're importing your CSS correctly. If you want to send me your code after class, then I can look at it in more detail. But what matters is that you have your href here pointing to the name of this file. And sometimes people will call it style. So if you named it differently, then you have to change that here. So like as you can see, if I name it style, then it messes up all my styles. So you need to make sure it matches this name. And then yeah, and then you'll need to make sure in your sections class. So here I have a sections class. We're using Flexbox. So here I'll say display flex, and then flex direction row. So this basically says keep things in the row order. This is the default, so I actually don't need this, but it's just more explicit. And then justify content space around. So that's really important, because if I took that away, then things are going to be squished to the left. But it's important to have space around so that the items are have space around them, basically. So does the style sheet link have to be in the head? Yeah, so the style sheet link should be in the head. That's where all of our elements that are not our actual content go, really. So the body is where we want our main content to go, and any like style sheets or other attributes would go in the header. What is the function of a in style? So okay, so I don't have the updated code here, but let's do it right now. So as you can see here, we have an a tag, and this is these ones, right? But they look kind of weird because they're blue and they have the underline. So oh, thanks. Yeah, so I'm gonna copy the code that was just sent, and here we can see that we can actually style our links in the way that we want them. So a tag is really just a link, but by default, all links on browsers are going to be blue and underlined. So what text decoration none does is say, don't add any extra decoration to our text. So, oh, well, we don't want that. So let's make it black. Yeah. Okay, so it looks like it's getting overridden. So I'm going to say important, and that still is not working. So it looks like my browser is actually overriding my styles for the A tag, so I won't worry about that too much. But really, we can look at the text decoration property. So that the text decoration property says, specifies the decoration added to the text, and so the different options are underline, line through, overline, all these different ones, and you can see all of them. Yeah, so we can see like default value is none, and then there's different options like underline, overline, line through, initial, and inherit. So basically what I was trying to do is say none, so that there's no line on my text, but my browser is being a little weird, so it's overriding it right now. But yeah, so in general, that's what that would do. Any other questions?
Yes, Succeed. I have a question.
Yeah.
So like you're centering like the entire body using text align center, but could you also
Yeah.
use align items center if it was possible?
No, so since our body is not display flex, we can't do that. So
I see.
you can only use the flex properties when you have display flex specified on the section that you're doing it in.
Correct. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me also explain this. So we have the script tags. So these are what allow us to not only use jQuery, which is a library that allows us to do these clicks and animations, as well as import our JavaScript file. So this is our JS file. The .js is our JavaScript file, and that is where all of our JavaScript and jQuery lives. And we have to make sure to import that so that we can get this animation. So if I take this out, then now the browser has nowhere to read the JavaScript coming from, so it doesn't do the nice animation, and it just jumps to the bottom of the page, as you can see. So we want to make sure we include this to get the
What is
smoother.
jQuery?
So yeah, so jQuery is basically, you can read here, it's a JavaScript library that allows for easy event handling and basically animation. So you don't have to worry about it because it's not very widely used anymore. And later in this course, we'll learn better ways to do what we want to do. But essentially, it's used to actually animate and do different events in our page. So for our case, yeah. So for our case, it's what we want to do when the click event happens. So the A tag, when it's clicked, it fires an event, as you can see here, and we the normal behavior for an event on an A tag is to just click a link, right, and go somewhere, like to another page. But in our case, we don't want to go to another page. We want to actually just go on the same page and scroll down. So that's why we say prevent default. And then the rest of this is just jQuery doing its thing, where jQuery will say animate to the item that we clicked. So it'll animate down to whatever section that we click here using the JavaScript.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you add an image for activities, how do you specify the size so it'll be a certain size?
Yeah, so here we have image, the image tag, class profile image. So that's really important. So when you specify a class, so this is the picture. So when I specify a class and then I'll go to profile image, you need a CSS property to say the height and the width of the image. So I can make it really small if I say 100 instead. And now we can see it changes the size of my image. So 500 I thought looked pretty good, but I can also make it really big, and you can play around with this and find the right size that you think fits your image the best. But what matters the most is that you have a class on your image, and then you can reference that in your CSS. Hey Jack, I see your question that your image doesn't load. If you post your code in the Slack channel or Slack me after class, I'll help you. It's kind of hard for me to do that when I can't see your code. Yeah, so to add an image, you'll need the source tag, the source attribute. So source basically says, where is this image stored in our file tree. So it'll always start wherever index.html is. So that's because we're in the index.html file. And basically source will say, okay, go to the image folder and look at profile.jpg. So we have that file right here, and load that image. So that's all that you need to do, is you have to say the path to the image, and then it'll go there. I'll just remove this // that makes it easier and a little easier to read. Cool, any other questions?
For your
Okay.
me section, how did you make your image go beneath your words?
That's just actually by writing it like this. So as long as your image is on the bottom of it, just in your HTML is below your words, then it'll go below your words. So you can actually control a lot of the ordering of elements just by writing it in that order. Cool. So next thing we'll do is create a tic-tac-toe game. So this will take some time, so it'll go into next class too, but we'll start doing that today. And if you guys have any other questions about the personal website, then feel free to Slack me or Slack the web design homework channel, and then we can answer it there. Cool. So I'm going to create another folder called Tic-Tac-Toe. And I'll delete some of these tabs. And then I'll open up Sublime Text. So again, don't worry too much about creating the file and writing all the code right now. You can do that for homework or after class. Just make sure you guys are following along and understand the code. So I'll create an index.html file again. So what I'm actually going to do is open the entire Tic-Tac-Toe folder. So that way I can now use Sublime to create new files. So I'll say new file, index.js. So those are the main two files we'll need. And then maybe a styles.css also. So the first thing we'll do for our HTML file is just do the HTML tags. As we learned in the previous classes, this is the base for any HTML file. And then you have the header, which we learned also, and the body. So this is the main structure for any HTML file. And then what we'll want to do is actually import our JavaScript. So we can do that like this, and or like this, and we just saw that in the personal website code. We'll also want to do link rel equals style sheet, and then the name of our CSS file, href equals styles.css. So now we're all set up for our CSS and our JavaScript. Cool. So in our body, we'll just say h1 tic-tac-toe game. So rel, don't worry about that too much. It's just saying the type of file it is a style sheet, and that means it's like describing the design of the page. That's just the format we use to import a CSS file. You never have to really use any other format, so just remember that basically. Cool.
Index.js
Yeah.
for in the previous one?
So index.js is used for any JavaScript that you want to write. So in our previous personal website, it was used for scrolling on the page, but sometimes it'll be used for other things like setting text dynamically on the page, and we'll see some of that in this tic-tac-toe game. Cool. So the next thing, so let's first open this on our browser. So we can go to Tic-Tac-Toe. We see our index.html page, so just drag that over to our browser, and we got it. So now we can see that our header is displayed at the top of the browser, so that's good. So the next thing we want to do is create something. So as you know, in a game, a tic-tac-toe game, the board is always going to be different depending on where you are in the game. And it's not like we can just say display an X and an O and an X and an O in this order, because the order will always be different. So we can't just say that in our HTML. We're going to actually have to use JavaScript for that, because JavaScript allows us to, like I said, dynamically change the text on a page. So instead, we'll use a div, which is just an empty container, and give it a class called target. So by giving it class target, we're able to say, okay, this is the class that we're going to use to find this div. So we'll see that right now when we do the JavaScript. So now I'll move into my JavaScript file, and I'll say, so basically what we'll want to do is say, we're going to create a render function. So to create a function, all you have to do is say, this is the syntax for render. So sorry, let me look at the chat really quick. For any questions about the website, just ask me in the Slack after class. Yeah, so this is the HTML page. Any questions about this?
Could you wait for a minute, like, because I need to finish copying down?
Yeah, don't worry about copying it down too much. I think it's more important that you follow along and you see everything that we're doing. So I'm going to say this is a function, and that tells JavaScript that this is that we want to call this function at some point. So we're actually going to call it right away, and we're just going to say render. So that's how you can basically say execute whatever is inside this function, and only do it once. So if I did this, then it would do it 3 times, but we only want to let's say display board. That's more clear. So this will display our tic-tac-toe board. Const just means it's a variable. So const JavaScript. Yeah, so I mean basically you can use const or let to describe variables. Const means it's a constant. So in here, this is how you do JavaScript comments. It's the same as Java. So const means the variable is constant and cannot be changed. Let means the variable is okay to change. So similarly, we could do like let I equals 0, and then I equals 1, and that is fine. But const I equals 0, I equals 1 is bad.
Could you do var display board equals function?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Could you do var display board equals function parentheses?
Yeah,
brackets?
yeah. So you can use var also, but var is a little old, and we try not to use that in JavaScript anymore. So as you can see here, we use const and let. We don't really use var anymore. So I don't know if they say anything about that on the page, but yeah. So they have that here, but in the newest version of JavaScript, they say we should use const and let.
Okay.
Cool. So now what we're going to do is say document dot query selector. So what this does is the method query selector determines the first element within the document that matches the specified selector or group of selectors. So there's many ways you can search for elements, as you can see here, but for our case, the first element with the class, my class, right? So this is exactly what we want. We're going to say, find the first element with this class. And as we saw in our code, the first element with this class that we want is target. So we're going to say, find the target, and you have to use a dot to say that it's a class name. And then now what we're going to do is set the inner HTML of our target. So here we're going to say, so now what we can do here, so we're going to set the inner HTML. Let's just try something out so that we can see this in action. So I'll just say div and div. So this again, or I can use any tag I want, and I'll just test this out. So let's do that. So looks like that didn't work actually. So I want to make sure. Oh, yeah. So as you can see here, it looks like it threw a syntax error, which is actually good because this is not allowed in JavaScript. You can't reassign a const variable. So I'm going to delete this, or I'll comment these out. So that's just an example for what you can do and what you can't do. So cool. So now we have our test. It's displayed on our page, and I can change this to whatever I want, and it'll be displayed on our page using JavaScript. So that's how you can just dynamically display content on our page using JavaScript functions like this. So what we'll want to do is now we'll want to create our board. So I'm going to make a class board, and then we can use pluses to actually to add more content. So here, and then plus, and then let's just say we want to X, and then cool. And then at the end, we'll want to say, we'll want to end our board. And then for each square, we'll just want to keep on adding on elements. So let's pretend the entire board is X's for now. So I'm just going to copy each one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 9 squares in a tic-tac-toe board. So that's why I just copied it 9 times. So let's see what this does. Cool. So we displayed our board here, and we can see that there's 9 X's. And obviously this is not our final product, but what we want is to be able to dynamically change this as our game is played.
What?
So
Man.
yeah, so Nan, I think is something wrong with our code where it's adding on something. Oh, I see. So we have we have 2 plus signs, and it's trying to add. So it's just a bug where we had too many plus signs, and then it displayed some things that we didn't want on our page. So as long as you have the right number of plus signs, it'll display correctly. So yeah, so this is how you do that. So next thing we'll want to do is use some CSS and design our page like a tic-tac-toe board. But let me pause there for questions first. Yeah, I'll post all the code online. Yeah, so let me explain this again. So this is just normal HTML. So we can put a class and we can put content. So this X is really just saying so this is the same as saying div like this. It's the same as doing this, but we need to use JavaScript to do this, and the way to do that is use strings. So actually, let me make this simpler for now, and I'll just do it like this. So that's all we need to do. We don't need to use too many plus signs now, and we can worry about that later. So this will display the same thing. I was just using too many plus signs. So yeah, so really we're just writing our same HTML, but in the format of a string in JavaScript.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
so let me go back to
excuse me, I have a
the
question.
index.html. Yeah.
It was actually a very quick question in the JavaScript tab.
Yeah.
So essentially, essentially what is going on is, are you basically giving the class square to any part of the HTML that has .target as its class?
Kind of. So what I'm actually doing is giving it the class board to the outer element. As you can see here, there's a div board here, and it's closed at the very bottom. So anything inside this board is a square, because as you know, in a tic-tac-toe game, you have a board,
Correct.
and then each
Yes.
square is inside. So yeah, so this class square is only for each X and O on our board, but the class board is for the whole thing.
So what does the .target imply then?
The target is just, so going back to the HTML, this is just the element that we want to use to display our board. So if I move the target above here, then yeah, I don't know why we lost this, but essentially essentially it'll go above the H1. So that's kind of weird. We might want to, yeah. So I forgot to have an ending div tag. That's what messed it up. So you can see here, it moved it above the tic-tac-toe game because it'll essentially add the HTML wherever I add my class target.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we only have a few more minutes, so I'm gonna go through really quick and add some CSS. I have it saved here and I can explain it. But so now you can see we have our board. So let me explain this really quick. So here's our board, display flex. So the width will say, let's make our entire board 600 pixels long and 600 pixels high. Since it's a square, we can make it the same amount. And then we have display flex. So let me move that next to the flex properties. So flex, we'll say make it a row and make it wrap also. So by saying it'll wrap, it's saying that move the squares to the bottom, as we saw earlier today. Wrap tells it to not squish things together and actually make it look nicer. So each square is 200 pixels. So let's see what happens when I remove wrap. So now we can see it's squished together in the 600 pixels, just as we saw earlier today with the frogs. So you need to make sure you have the flex wrap to make sure it looks nicer and is not squished together. Because each square has 200 pixels, because it's 600 divided by 3 is 200.
Yeah.
And you want to have 3 squares in each row. And then justify content flex start, that just says to move everything to the start of the thing. I don't know if we actually need this. Yeah, we don't need that property. Do we have a question?
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing we want to do is say give it a border. So the border is 5 pixels and it's solid and it's black. So you guys can look at the border CSS property. And it basically says this is a bad page for it. Here, border width, border style, border color. So that's the order of things. Width, style, color. So we could do a dotted line here. And it'll be dotted, but we don't want that obviously. And then solid, and then black, we can make it red. So you can change your border however you want it to look. Let's do black. And then the 5 pixels will change the weight of the border. So you can make it bigger or smaller, depending on how you want it to look. So 100 pixels is way too big, obviously, but yeah. So yeah, so I'll keep it as 5 pixels. And then font size basically makes our X a little bigger. So the X is super small. This is a default font. So I'll use pixels to make things easier. So I'll say 40 pixels. Like, okay, 64 pixels. So that makes our X's a little bigger. And then we want to make this a flex container again and align it to the center. And we saw this earlier today again, because if you don't have this, then it'll always be in the left and the top. That's the default in HTML, to just be the top of your container. So we'll use the center properties here to make it centered. And then the last thing is we can have a background color. So I'll just make this normal green, is easier. And you can basically say cursor pointer also. Cursor pointer says, instead of, so as you guys can see my mouse right now, it looks like just a normal mouse, but here we can see that it changes the mouse style to like a pointer, like you want to click something. And you can just say cursor pointer for that, to say that this square is clickable. So later when we actually click it, it'll actually change the state of our game and say that they selected this. So for now we won't do that, but yeah, so that's our CSS. For now, I'm actually going to remove all the X's so that we can see an empty board to start the game. And then next class, we will start adding the functionality to click a square and add an X. So yeah, that's it for this class. If you guys have any questions, I'll stay for a few minutes.
When will you post this code on the tinyURL website?
I'll post it right after class.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, I'll go to the HTML.
Why, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, so the hover property is what tells the browser what happens when your mouse goes over that box. So if I remove this property, then nothing will happen when I move my mouse over it. But if I add these properties, it basically says, how do you want to style your container when your mouse goes over it? So now it'll become green. Yeah, here's the HTML. The code will be on the tinyURL, tinyurl.com/shelter coding. Shelter in place, right? Shelter, yeah, this URL. Any other questions?
Thank you. Can you go to the JS, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Could you explain the document.query selector line?
Yeah, so document.querySelector says, find me this element on the page. So document is basically our document, our page right here. Query selector says, find me the element and find me this dot target. So dot, when you put dot in front of a class or in front of text, it means it's a class name. So as we saw here, the class is a target. So use the dot in front of target to say like, let's find the class name of target. And then dot inner HTML says add inside this element. So like in between this element, add HTML basically. And then we can put whatever we want in the form of a JavaScript string as the HTML. Okay, I'm going to post the code online, and next class we will start adding items to our board.